Anything anyone want pulled off the consent agenda?
Number 4, please.
Okay. Anything else? Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as modified?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. Any against? All right, why don't we just go right into number 4 then?
Okay. I have no problem with the tables from the cafeteria that are broken and they are beyond repair.
Mhm.
And I do have a couple of questions on the math book. The workbook, I guess. Is that book available to look at?
I have it.
Can
Yeah.
you please pass it down? Thank you. And how many are these that
Yes.
need to be?
81.
Now, I understand the reasoning. This is a math book. It's called the Eureka Math, grade 6, module 4. I'm not familiar with it, but
Mhm.
what the reason I asked for it to be pulled is since taxpayer money, including every board member is a taxpayer, paid for these books, and I understand that it is no longer in compliance with the current math curriculum. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And so my concern is math which was never one of my strong subjects. Math is math. So,
Not anymore.
well, okay, so if a question in this workbook, doesn't, so if, maybe, what has changed, the procedure? Or
The whole, I mean, if you want to talk about that, Amy, there's alignment.
briefly, there's no
Yeah.
need in beating this to death.
No. So the difference between Eureka and Eureka Squared, really, they looked at the alignment to the New York State specific, the New York State standards, and the sequence of which the skills are being taught, but also this module, Eureka Squared, allows for students to do more practice and less, we're trying to give them more time for talking with one another and work through the procedural piece, not just the computation, straight math. So their thinking is more visible in this sequence and the way the questions are worded. They've also worked on wording the question, so it's not a reading test. So they're really assessing the math skills, not the reading skills, when the teachers are going through it. In addition, the way that the curriculum is aligned for the teachers, there are quick videos that assist the students. So they will do a quick introduction, and that allows, again, for some small group work to happen, so teachers can rotate through based on where the students are within it. So part of it was that last year when I joined, the first edition, the Eureka had already been ordered, but the teachers had been trained in Eureka Squared, and they thought that they were getting Eureka Squared. So I inherited that. So that happened from, for whatever reason. And so we were able to get those from Eureka, and then having that conversation, it was really what the teachers felt supported what they were trying to do in alignment with the math coach.
But to be specific on these books, we plan to try to either sell them or donate them. They're not gonna be just chucked
Well,
in the
no.
garbage can.
Okay.
Yeah, our goal is definitely to sell
That's-
them, and we've already
yes.
identified several schools who are using Eureka, not Eureka Squared.
Mhm.
So once the board approves them for excess, we can reach out to them and we can go through the process to offer.
Okay, thank you, because I was not aware of that, and I'm saying the answers in math, 50 cents minus 100 equals 50, unless there's some reason it didn't. And then my question would have been, is this doesn't this have any educational value, which it does? See, I didn't know that because, of course, the board it did not say that. Possibly in the future, so I don't waste the board's time with this, is if somebody would put a little blurb in executive.
It's in the problem is we have to drop it down into like the executive
Yes.
content, and then at least I do. I pull up the thing, I look at it and I go, oh, nothing there. And it's really down off the screen.
Okay, I didn't, so that's why I flagged it, but knowing that we will either sell or it will be used again for, since it has educational value, then I have no objection to number 4 in its entirety.
Okay.
Thank
Do I
you.
have a motion on number 4?
Can I ask you a question now?
Mhm.
So there's 81. How many? I mean, this one is grade 6, but is it more than one grade? Or is it just,
I do believe that they are remaining from the middle school. I don't believe they're all grade 6, but it's all the same exact
Right.
reason.
are there more at all? Because it's Eureka Square now for the entire district.
Right, so
So
if they
I
were utilized, we
believe
wouldn't
that-
be accessing them.
I believe those, even though they're workbooks, the team used them as a textbook, so students didn't write in them. So it wasn't one per student, like it was a class set kind of thing.
Okay.
So if you look at it that way, that set for 6th grade would have stayed with that classroom. They wouldn't have brought it home. Understanding, but I can check on it. With
But
the
in other
numbers.
grades, they were writing in them, so they would have to be accessed anyway.
Right, and now the ones that if children wrote in them, can they go home to the families? Because I feel there's educational value and, you know,
From last year.
Well, they would have gone home with the child.
Yeah, they
would have-
opened them last year. This year they started with the new ones.
with the new ones,
Mhm.
right? So I wasn't sure if there's,
Right, so if there were ones that were written in, they were issued to a child and they would be
Mhm.
with the child. We don't collect them. But we wouldn't reuse them again. And like these are one and been used.
okay.
Yeah, and primarily because they were doing work on separate paper, using it in that way.
I have a question about something, not this. Can I ask it?
What's it related to?
I have a question on number 7. It's approved and everything, it's just a question.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
we approved it.
really, just, whatever, when we do this motion, the second, after that, between there and voting on is when you're supposed to ask questions.
Oh,
But go ahead.
Howard jumped right in, I
I
couldn't get
know,
off.
I know,
Just-
it's always happening.
So I see that it's for after school, the middle school learning center, after school support. Are there, is that, do they do that? I mean, I'm pretty sure they.
There
don't
have
do it.
been funds that have been set aside for Elm and Alden. It would be up to the principals to make that happen.
So there is funds available.
There were
for
last year too.
Elm and Alden and the high school?
Generally speaking, the high school has something very similar to this, or they come down to the middle school.
Okay, so it's something that if anyone listening wanted to know about it, they could contact the principal of those schools about.
Right, so
Money.
currently, Alden and Elm have not approved anyone to do after school help. The funds have been set aside to do that.
Okay. And they were last year also, you said?
That's
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No, it's all right. I just, the last thing we want is anybody calling up, and go, you didn't follow Robert's rules. All right, so we didn't vote on that, right?
We didn't.
A motion, as per number 4.
So
Do I-
moved.
Thank you.
I'll
Do I have a second? Any questions, comments, anything? All in favor? Aye. Any again? All right. All right, BOCES Spotlight, your entertainment. Capital project update.
I'm just really starting here.
Well, you have to take the fancy table with the water.
Yeah.
You and Joe.
I'm just gonna switch us to the smart board, it's the.
Your-
Thank you.
Well, you made me. A Well, let's jump right in here. So we're gonna go over just a couple of, kind of gonna start out our capital presentation with a just a review of the timeline, because this has been a multi-year endeavor. We started back in 2021-22. So in January of 22, we selected our architects and our construction managers. Joe Reagan is here from BBS, our architectural firm. Fred Siva was on screen until I moved him off, but I'll put him back real quick. Fred, you can say hi to everybody. There's Fred. All right. And in the spring of 22, we really did our off-cycle building condition survey to establish the baseline of needs in our district. And we identified $42 million worth of like in-kind. It's old. Here's the new version of what's old. It speaks nothing towards improving anything about our buildings or systems. But at baseline, we had started with a $42 million consideration for improvements and in-kind replacements of our building systems, mechanicals, and structures, and things of that nature. In March, we had Train join our conversation to discuss the potential benefits of an energy performance contract, things that would be aligned with our sustainability initiative as part of our strategic plan to really reduce our carbon footprint, become more efficient, more sustainable as a district. And then for the rest of the year, you really worked on identifying the fundamental pieces of that scope. In the 23-24, that's the typo on me, 23-24 school year, we really got into this pre-referendum design phase. So if you remember back in June, at the end of last year, we really brought forward the first kind of look at what this capital project bundling could look like. Over the summer, our design team and our full project team, so our board facility subcommittee, our engineers, architects, the EPC partners, everybody kind of came together all summer to start looking at how we can really, what these projects would look like. And so we took that baseline concept of like basic needs and said, well, if we're going to make investments in our building, we're really going to look to improve the condition and the quality of our educational facilities. It's not, good enough isn't good enough. And we know that we can't have the state of the art everything. So we don't want to go to this extreme, Rolls Royce version of all the things, but we also recognize that a bare bones replacement for buildings that are largely original to their construction condition in the mid-century wouldn't be enough either. And so our design professionals really dug into what those improvements would look like. And we started to put the scope of work together, which we're going to share with you today. What I did want to do is jump ahead. So we're in October. We've got our EPC identified. We've got the scope identified. We're going to present it to you tonight. But this vote is scheduled for May 21st of 2024. And so I kind of want to just give the board a little look backwards from May. So in order to hit the May vote, by mid-March, the board has to adopt a resolution to submit a bond proposition for this project. So there was some questions about when do we have to take action? Well, the formal action happens mid-March. There's going to have to be secret resolutions and bond resolutions where bond counsel is going to work with us to construct what this proposition or propositions look like on that May vote. The board as a whole will have to take affirmative action on that in early to mid-March. So from now to March is really our tighten up what we want to do and start messaging and marketing it to the community, right? From January to March, we really want to use that window for our public relations and marketing campaigns to bring this information to the public. I think sometimes when we live and breathe it week to week, day to day, it's so ingrained in our mentals and our processes that we forget that this is very foreign to some people. And for some folks that are either new to the district, new to our community, or just started paying attention, that they're going to need to have this really laid out from them from the beginning. And so I'm hopeful that this explanation tonight and that process for some of our folks that are really starting to dial into what we're doing.
So some of those, though, we need to establish dates like now. Like if we're going to ask the fire companies to let us use their buildings in March, we need to say East Clinton is going to be, we're going to go after either 525 or 37. and start making those, I would think. I mean,
Only if I'm correct, it's not gonna be March. We're gonna look to do January.
Get
February.
out there January, February, for sure.
so, I mean, for us to get those firehouses. And we can do it here at the school, but for us to go to those firehouses, we gotta make those reservations like now.
I agree, and I think we had talked previously about a balance of both, like bring people to us, sure, we have plenty of events that, and I'd love to have visual aids and marketing materials available in the lobbies of all of our buildings, whether it's parent pickup on a random Tuesday, or it's parent teacher night, or it's the concert, or it's, you know, the musical, like, we want this stuff visible for everyone. And then we also want to bring it to the people where they are, at the firehouses, the community centers, the churches, wherever we need to go to find our people. And we kind of have to balance it in both ways. And so, in fairness to our very skilled designers, like I'm looking at Joe, our architect, he's gonna have to draw some of these things up for us. So we need to give him some real tight direction as to what we want to market. And that's part of the discussions today. And I would say from now to the end of the calendar year is really giving Joe and his team that information so that when we come back from our winter recess in January, we're ready to hit the ground running this marketing campaign. So some background information, I'll call this one slide, the history of capital renovations in Millbrook Central School District in 30 seconds or less. Our three main buildings, Elm Elementary, Alden Elementary, and Millbrook Middle School, were constructed between 1954 and 1960. In 1992, we added a wing to Alden and a wing to Elm. In 2006, we built our high school. In 2000, roundabout, on or about 2013, we added our athletic fields and did a small scale energy performance contract, which improved some of our unit ventilators and some of the windows at Alden, but also included roof work at Elm and Alden elementary schools. And since 2017, we've done $1 million in what we call capital outlay and cash funded small scale capital improvements, including the secure vestibules at Millbrook Middle School and Alden Place Elementary and Millbrook High School. That's it. That is the 60-year scope of capital renovations in Millbrook Central School District. The vast majority of our buildings and overall square footage are largely in their originally constructed state.
If only. I mean, most of our buildings aren't even up to par with what they originally were. You know, there was a lot of maintenance things done that just, that's not the way you should do it, but we are where we are. So,
Yeah, and we'll talk about, you know, where we fit compared to the rest of the county just a little bit in terms of volume of work and things of that nature. But I wanted to give it to Caroline to speak to kind of how we got here conceptually.
Yeah, and in parallel, starting really around the same time in the 21 school year, we had started a strategic plan for the district, which is essentially the 5-year plan that will guide us in our work. And we identified a mission and a vision. So the reason we exist and where we hope to be going, right? And in so doing, we have really focused a lot on students creating their own path through success through different personalized learning opportunities. And so when we speak about capital project planning, we talk about if we're going to be taking walls down, let's put them back with some enhancement to our programs so that our students have the absolute best opportunities to learn and grow here, not just as students, but also as future, you know, participating, contributing citizens in not just our local community, but the world around us. So we talk about wanting to be innovative and wanting to collaborate, and to be able to do that, there are some things that we really want to be able to provide our students in terms of opportunity. We have discussions all the time. How do we keep students in Millbrook, right? Instead of going to other private schools where they have different opportunities. And we really came up to what we value here in Millbrook, and being able to create those comprehensive, diverse learning experiences where students can thrive, right? Where they can really pursue their own individual interests with our support here. We want them to do many things in terms of ethical behavior and a strong moral compass. And of course, all of our programs support that, but our program enhancements have quite a bit to do with evolution as responsible global citizens, and teaching about sustainability and making decisions to limit our carbon footprint, right? And to be able to really allow our students the opportunity to be competitive and have competitive opportunities that other school districts in the area are able to provide their students. So we had created 4 pillars, and essentially those pillars are methods, meaning how do we do the things that we do? Where do we keep students at the center and focus? How do we provide them opportunities for input and to be able to be contributors to the school district that they come to every day for their education? In terms of connectedness, right? We want to be able to have students feel like they belong here, have a sense of identity. We are Millbrook, we are Blazers. How do we create that? How do we create a place where students feel socially and emotionally supported as well as in their pursuit of their academics? And sustainability being a huge one, not just, environmental sustainability, but also our financial sustainability and being able to make decisions now and responsibly plan out things like capital project work and being able to make sure that not just our needs right now are within our vision and within our scope of work, but preparing for our needs that may come. That's a really big part of our strategic plan, is to lay the groundwork to be able to make sure that we can plan responsibly and we don't have to neglect our buildings, because we'll be able to do this responsibly over time. And then discourse, right? How do we bring the community into this conversation? How do we get information out? How do we get information in? And how do we make sure that there's clarity and there's partnership between the school district and the community as the space in which we function and the people that we support every single day. And so when we look at that, this is sort of the explanation of how our strategic plan will support this work. And again, one of the ways that I think we'll probably see the most enhancement is that sustainability piece, and being able to really minimize our carbon footprint and work on efficiencies all over. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest things that one of our folks from Train had spoken about, is how inefficient our buildings are. And a lot of that is because we're working with very old equipment, very old materials. And, realistically speaking, we're going to find, savings and benefits, but it's going to cost us something up front. And so being able to think about that, being able to also make sure that when we make these decisions, that we look at what's best, for developing those skills that our students need, not today, but in their future. And how do we make that happen here, and do that responsibly?
So with that, we're going to give you just a brief overview of the type of things that we're looking at and how we're looking to package them for the public. And I just want to give a shout out to every group list that our administration has been integral to this process. The Board of Education Facilities Subcommittees given a lot of time to this endeavor as well. So thank you, Chris, David, and Jennifer. BBS Architects and Engineers, the Palumbo Group, Train Technologies, and Bernie Dunnigan out of office have all been with us from the beginning. And we really appreciate all the effort that went into this. So we're looking at a 3-proposition package in terms of capital improvements. And so the way what that means is we're going to talk about proposition 1 as kind of our baseline proposition. These are our most basic needs that we feel like need to be addressed with prioritization. So proposition 1 is HVAC improvements, building condition survey issues, and related is when we brought in Train Technologies, they're going to look to, like Caroline said, improve our buildings through cost savings, recognized or realized through energy consumption upgrades. So in very plain English, what that means is if you have $100 electric bill every month and Train comes in and says, well, that piece of equipment that you're paying $100 a month to operate, we can replace it and it'll cost you $20 a month to operate. And we'll sell it to you for $75 of that $80 difference in monthly cost. So it's a lease that's structured from the projected savings of your operating costs. And so part of our proposition 1 is roughly a $6 million energy performance contract that really does improve our energy usage by creating efficiency upgrades. So what some of those include is upgrading how our boilers function, converting them to hot water from steam in a very basic way, right? If you're gonna heat anything with steam, in order to make steam, you have to heat water to 212 degrees. If you're gonna heat it with hot water, you might be able to heat that space effectively with 140-degree water, which means I don't have to make the water as hot, I don't have to burn as much fuel. There's savings recognition there. So there's things like that as part of the energy performance contract. It also will include a full control system upgrade to how we operate the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning systems. Between BBS and Train, they've designed a dedicated outdoor air system type of service, which we talked about back in August, if you remember, but that is to pre-treat the air that comes into the building. And then part of that system will provide comprehensive cooling throughout every building. If you remember back in 2018, there was a rather uncomfortable situation involving environmental air quality that required us to do some shuffling of bodies across our real estate portfolio. I could say that gently, avoiding the words nobody wants to hear. But some of those things happen because of how air flows through a building and how a building breathes. And so to bring in new versions of the old stuff that caused that problem didn't feel entirely responsible from an air quality management perspective. We really said, if we're gonna rip out all of our HVAC equipment, let's not just put it back in kind. Let's change and improve how the building breathes to improve how our children breathe. And that's something that we looked at as a system design piece. And it was one of those conversations that evolved. So the scope of this project grew as we said, well, we know we have that problem at Elm for sure, so they should get a better system. And then the natural question is, well, if they're gonna get the upgraded system, why wouldn't we do that at Alden? Why wouldn't we bring that to the middle school, right? So we, as a committee, as a board, kind of as this project evolved, said, if we're gonna improve the air quality of one building, we should improve the air quality of all three of our oldest buildings. And so that's baked into this Proposition 1. In that full HVAC system renovation, comprehensive cooling, electrical system upgrades. So some of those electrical panels at Elm Drive, I think all of the electrical panels or most of at Elm Drive are original 1954, 1960 electrical panels. So to put all this pretty fancy new equipment on that old electrical grid is really not a great idea. It might not even work. And so that becomes some of that related work that we spoke about. If you look behind some of our board members here, you'll see an example of those beautiful single pane windows that have been here since 1960 in this building. You can imagine at home, if you have single pane windows, your heating bill is a lot higher than it needs to be. You probably get advertisements from Anderson and those kind of places telling you that a double pane, thermally insulated window is gonna be better for your house. Same rules apply to us here in our schools. If we're gonna change how the building breathes, if we're gonna look to save money and how much fuel we burn to heat it, we want to keep that heat in the building to the best of our ability. And so those envelope upgrades, windows, roofs, that kind of stuff is part of it. The middle school roof replacement, this roof does leak. It is at the end of its warranty period. It's cost us a lot of time, money, and energy to keep the water out of this building, thanks to the condition of our roof. So it has to happen anyway. The exciting piece of that is, it is the largest square footage roof we have. And half of our energy performance contract proposal is to bring photovoltaic solar panel energy collectors and put them on the middle school roof as part of the roof replacement. So as Caroline stated before, if we're gonna open up a wall before we close it, we gotta really think about what we're gonna do with it. Very similar philosophy here. We're gonna replace this roof and we wanna be more sustainable. We wanna reduce our carbon footprint. We wanna reduce our dependency on the grid. Now's the time to look at designing the new roof to support a photovoltaic array that's going to help us generate our own electricity on site and offset some more of our costs. And again, just you see at the bottom bullet there, that energy performance contract work is going to be a net zero impact to the taxpayer. It's all going to be funded out of existing operating expenses and debts.
So let me, before you go on. So we have a subcommittee that's been working on this like continuously. And I think we're at a point now where we need to get like approved, oh, I'm not saying approved, but we need to approve or not approve at this level. This is what we're gonna put out as Proposition 1, Proposition 2, Proposition 3. I'm assuming the subcommittee has been through this. You're cool with this whole, the way the Prop 1, 2, and 3 are broken down? Okay,
We spent an hour before this meeting just to kind of go through everything and make sure as well.
good. So
So
the other thing, and I know you don't want to say mold, but too bad. Honestly, mold's gonna happen, It costs us a crap load of money. We luckily were able to move kids around, move things in and out, change things. Got insurance on some of it, but the bottom line is it's going to happen again and again and again. The moisture in Elm Drive caused the entire floor or most of the floor to lift up off of the cement. This is the, you know, a combination of us having 60-year-old buildings, 60-year-old technologies and changing weather. And it's going to get hotter and it's going to get more humid. So these are not, you know, I think mold is a great thing to bring out because we cannot have our kids in moldy environments. And if we don't do something like windows and HVAC, we're just asking for it again. So anyway.
Appreciate that, thank you. You want to talk to them?
Sure. So for Proposition 2, we talked about program enhancements and additional items that were identified in the building conditions survey that need to be addressed. So if you look at Elm Drive Elementary School, this is a topic that we've been talking about for a couple of years, and that is the enhancing the safety and security of the building by adding a new secure vestibule. That would replace the front entrance that faces, well, around, but if this would be adding a secure vestibule to the side parking lot, right now where parent pickup is, and that would be also to shift some of the program there and adding a monitor's greeter station in that vestibule. And in addition to that, at the Millbrook Middle School, we would be replacing the existing chair lifts in our spine, in the spine of the building with elevators to be more accessible for our population. And we would also be working to become code compliant in those particular areas. So there would be some changes to the stairs and also in the auditorium as well. There needs to be an additional door created from ground access down towards the front of the building. We also would be looking at some fire alarm upgrades in the system in the middle school as well. And then something that I'm really excited about is some improvements to the instructional space. A lot of the work that we talk about in Prop 1 and Prop 2, realistically, it's not going to be exciting. It's going to be helpful in the way that the buildings breathe, and it's going to be awesome because we don't have to worry about things like mold. We'll be able to do all of that, but I think Prop 2 is super exciting because this is where the students and the community members are really going to feel the changes, right? We're going to be putting a new world-class technology stream center in the high school library. We're going to be making a robotics area. We're going to have a green screen so students can use technology to create, you know, it could be like a video, like vlog or whatever it would be called, right? They can make different announcements. They can use it for so many things. And then all of the other technology pieces that we can have a full makerspace in the high school. Currently, all of those experiences for students in terms of a makerspace experience happen at the middle school, right? So being able to enhance our high school library would also include that kind of thing, but it would be an expansion of the space. So it would actually have a larger footprint. And in so doing, we would be able to access the science lab classrooms that are immediately above that and be able to update some of the way that they're heated and also cooled as well. So we would be creating efficiencies there. And like we had said, well, while we're going in there in the first place, let's use that opportunity to bump out that wall and really improve what we have in terms of that library media space and making it a full stream lab. Additionally, we would be, that's the high school. And then in the middle school, we would be looking at the first floor, which is just above the auditorium there. And there's lab classrooms for technology down there now. We would be able to utilize that space for technology, family and consumer science, and also a middle school makerspace. So we would be able to not just have students experience that in the high school, but also have some of the pre-engineering preparation happen in middle school to get kids really excited about what's coming next. We would also be expanding the walk-in freezer here in this building. And we would be looking at improving the auditorium lights. And that would be for both buildings. We would do that. Some of you who have students in the music program may understand that that has been a challenge. We have a state-of-the-art soundboard specifically in the high school, and currently, as complicated as it is not currently in good working order. And that's a challenge, just to have a regular assembly or to have a musical performance and to be able to showcase all the fantastic things that our students do and work so hard, right, to prepare for. So it'll be really exciting for them. And then another thing that we would be doing at the high school is that we would be providing ventilation in our weight room, which is located adjacent to the gymnasium now. And then some of what was proposed in Prop 3 are other program enhancements, but we felt as though Prop 2, those are real priorities. We absolutely want to be able to offer those things to our students. And these, I think, no less important, but sometimes you have to make really tough decisions about what you prioritize. And when we were thinking about the greenhouse, we were thinking about the fact that, you know, we love this option. But the only reason it got deprioritized to Prop 3 is because there could be a different way to do this within our program scope if this is not something that is, you know, thought after by the taxpayers. The large group instructional space at the middle school, this would be to solve an issue that we have where we have spaces that can fit 400 people and we have spaces that can fit about 30 people, but we really don't have any mid space in that. And so having like a grade level wide assembly becomes very challenging, right? It's either in a very large auditorium where you can have that message and that conversation be lost in the space, or it's going to be cramped into one space that really just isn't beneficial for that, you know, particular interest. Our science labs in the middle school, they were originally built for high school classes, and they are functional at this time. We would love to be able to renovate them. We would love to be able to update them, but understanding that our priority has to be the lab space at the high school because it is not as functional, right? The space is not laid out particularly ideally. And so we have to prioritize those science labs as well as the heating issues. And then in the library renovations at the middle school, we want to be able to reimagine that and make it a collaborative workspace. And so we would be looking to do some of those things as well. And then there are some needs to repair the retaining wall outside of the high school. So that would be Prop 3. And like it says, additional program enhancements, and that's the remainder of the BCS issues being that retaining wall.
So as you've heard us say, you know, kind of as we've gone through this presentation, prioritization has been a big part of this process. And unfortunately, given our confined resources, we're trying to be very cognizant of how this impacts our taxpayers and our community. And so realistically, every decision to do was a decision to not do. And I commend our committee, especially our board members who've been involved and our administrators who had to start making those what not to do decisions. And I just wanted to highlight for the full board and the community watching at home, what that looks like. We have a slide here for deferred project scope. These are things that we have considered throughout this process that just, you know, compared to the items in props 1, 2, and 3, we just felt they're important, they're necessary, they're certainly beneficial to our schools and our community. But when something has to give, every decision to do is a decision to not do. And these are the things that the committee as a whole felt could be deferred. And not to say we would never do it, but that we would consider it in a future vote should these needs remain consistent over the next couple of years. And you'll see this is all of the traffic augmentations that we discussed, the new roadway at Elm, reconfiguring parent and bus pickup and drop off at Alden, and redesigning the traffic flow here at the main campus, adding a traffic circle. There were some really beautiful concepts brought forward by VBS's design team of ways that we could do better in how we move vehicles and people in and out of our campuses. But that was a $6 million number on its own. 6.6, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And so that was just a heavy lift considering how impactful the other things were that got prioritized, propositions 1, 2, and 3. Part of that was also with Elm Drive's secure vestibule. There was a proposal to really move and relocate some of the spaces in that building to move our main office closer to that vestibule area and reposition some of our classroom spaces. But again, it wouldn't necessarily impact the program of that building to the extent that some of our other program enhancements would, and so was prioritized to the deferred list. And the same with the Alden work. We have looked at renovating building a cafeteria, renovating the kitchen. And a lot of that was driven by some scheduling concerns at Alden, and it's like Caroline said about the greenhouse. It's a beautiful idea and it would be great to do, but there are other ways we can address some of those needs, perhaps differently. Through fixtures, through furniture, through piecemeal upgrades, without a major construction project. So some of these deprioritized items are exactly that. It's, you know, upon further review, there might be a different way to meet that need that doesn't involve intensive construction. Whereas some of the other stuff that we looked at in a few of the earlier slides, there's no way to do that without intensive construction. So this is just a summary of the proposition components. Prop 1 comes in at 52.8 million, and that is inclusive of the EPC, which is kind of a self-funded thing. We would still want the voters to authorize it if possible to increase our building aid, but they wouldn't have to necessarily fund that through the tax revenue. So the total cost of Prop 1 though would be 52.8, Prop 2, 15.6 million, I'm sorry, and Prop 3 is $6.5 million. So if someone, or if our voters authorize the entire scope of work that we're discussing tonight, it's just above $75 million. So before we get into what that looks like to the taxpayers, I wanted to share this slide to show the board and the community where Millbrook falls in terms of Dutchess County capital construction work. So what you're going to see is all of the districts and our component and our BOCES on the left-hand side. You're going to see on the second column, it's work since 2013. And this is information that was gleaned from my colleagues around the county, as well as our financial advisors. Some of these are estimates, some of these are actuals. The italicized numbers that are extra round, with a lot of zeros, those are kind of ballpark figures that were provided by administrators. Some of the more specific numbers, our friends at BPD, Mr. Schwartz and his team helped us acquire those actual figures. On the third column, you'll see recent and in progress. That is everything that the state education department has listed for every district and our BOCES in Dutchess County, and the earliest authorizations that are still in progress at any step. Okay, and then in the last column, you'll see the qualifier for that third column. So I'll start with Millbrook at the top. Millbrook has done, we're going to kind of go right to left. Millbrook's done just over $1 million in work since 2018. And I told you that was the secure vestibules and those little projects like that. Since 2013, we're at 12 million. That was the athletic field and the small EPC that we did. And that's pretty much it for 10 years. And if you look down the list, I don't have to read these to you, but I can tell you that the recent and in progress list comes in at about $414 million, of which Millbrook did again. So just a little bit of context. A lot of our other neighboring districts have been doing more regular capital work. Sometimes they do big projects, sometimes they do small projects. When Mr. Schwartz speaks in just a few minutes, he'll speak to maintaining a level debt service and the value of that. And as old debt comes off the books, we kind of replace it with new debt to keep our budgets level. And some districts do pretty good job of that and keep the workflow steady. You know, considering that we've gone 60 years without major work, and now we're looking at $75 million in work under consideration. You know, it just wanted to provide this slide to put some of that in context. So with that, I'm going to just switch slide decks and I'll introduce Mr. Jason Schwartz, the president of Bernard P. Dunnigan Incorporated, and he'll speak to how this can affect our taxpayers. Just give me 1 second, Jason.
Yep.
Do you want to click or you want to?
Either way, whatever's easier.
I have it if you want
Yep.
it. If you want it.
So that way, don't.
So I can't get it wrong. There we go. That's for you.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everybody. So we have a nice big report in front of you. It's kind of, talking about the math textbooks earlier, it's, kind of about showing your work, right? So, but we know that the fun part of this process is talking about the scope and the improvements, not the financials. We're self-aware that not everybody wants to talk about bond rates and be math nerds, so. So I will go through just at a very high level, kind of what we have in the report here. But certainly if there's any more specific questions that you want to dive deeper in anything, just let me know. But since it is a pretty detailed 27-page report, we're not going to go through it in excruciating detail tonight. So usually where we start, to Elliot's point, one of the big things with the tax cap, over the last 10, 11 years is kind of management of local share and trying to maintain and not have drop-offs in debt, because that can have, negative consequences on your tax cap. So this is a picture of what is out there right now for all your existing local shares. So this is, some of the pieces Elliot was just talking about in terms of that 12 million work you've done. When you did the high school back then, that all is playing into this in terms of your total debt service and the building aid you're getting back. And then it's really that far right-hand column that we're looking at in terms of the local share. One of the places where we kind of started this process was what could fit into that drop off in terms of maintaining a level local share. And that was only about 18 or 19 million. So as you kind of went through and prioritized needs and scopes, one of the things we talked about is that's probably not enough to kind of get what you need to have done. So we're looking at going beyond that. And then really the goal would be maybe down the road, as some of this existing debt drops off, we might be able to maintain whatever new level we go to, and then be able to do kind of smaller, more frequent projects without additional tax increases in the future. But so that is one piece, though. We do know that we have that drop off in local share coming up. So we are going to, although that's not enough, we can leverage it to at least offset a little bit of the impact of what this project could do. And this is just kind of the bar chart version of how we look at that. So once we kind of set the stage of the existing piece, we kind of look at, timing of how this could work in terms of, this is just kind of a generalized timeline of what the project might look like. If you vote in May, you're really not talking about going out for any kind of financing or construction for really a year or two because of the timeline of design and SED approval. So that kind of fits well again, with where that drop off is, that this work can come in and layer in over the top of that. So now that we've kind of set, what's the existing look like and what's our timeline, we start to look at, the scope items that the committee has prioritized and how do those look in terms of financial impacts. So this page right here is just kind of taking that scope sheet that you have at the back of this packet that kind of details out everything that Elliot and Caroline just went through. We just pull it into a different format that we use for kind of looking at the aidability of the work on a building by building basis. So that's really all this is just taking those scope documents and breaking them down by building. And then we layer that into kind of what we call the maximum cost allowances or the aid allowances at each building. So we can see how much of that work is going to be aided at the district's 23% building aid ratio. And that all factors into ultimately this schedule is kind of where we're looking at, how do we pay back this, in this case, Prop 1 being about 46 million, which is that 52 million that Elliot referenced, just less the EPC. We're not factoring that into this schedule since that, as Elliot already covered, that kind of self-funds itself. So the remaining 46 million of work in Prop 1 outside of the energy performance contract. One of the things the district has is to help, offset the need to do this larger amount of work is the district has put aside 10 million in capital reserve, has another $1.5 million that they're anticipating being able to contribute from fund balance. So that certainly helps decrease the tax impact a little bit of this by putting that 11.5 million in. So you see that in the upper left-hand corner. And then the remaining 35 million balance that we would need to pay back with borrowings, we would bond over 15 years. And that's because that's the term in which the debt service or the building aid is paid back over by the state. So we try to align the debt service to match with the building aid so that we get a relatively smooth local share and don't have mismatches or kind of peaks or valleys there. So you can see the debt service in the middle of the page on this proposition, the aid coming back, and then again, that far right-hand column, the local share is what we're really looking at. And then from there, we kind of take that maturity schedule for that Proposition 1 and layer that back into the existing local share. So you see that blue column carries forward from that earlier page. We layer in that new project and then we come up with a new total local share that we're projecting for this project going forward. And then from there, we say, okay, this level of the bars that's above that line there, the black line is kind of our existing local share that's built in the current budget. So that's, anything below that line is being absorbed by that retiring debt and the cash and reserves that we're taking in, and then everything above that would be the tax increase that we're looking at and quantifying. We take that and break it down based on the full values of the town to come up with a tax rate. But obviously people, the average homeowner doesn't necessarily know like, what does a tax rate mean to me? So we put it into what we call our house page, which really takes that and breaks it down nicely for you based on, exemption levels or full value of your house, where you fit in, and there's a nice range of options you can look at there. We have a summary page at the end that we'll look at that kind of focuses in on the $500,000 value house. So just using that one as an example for, as we go through these scenarios tonight. If you had a $500,000 house with a basic star exemption, you'd be at about $269 of annual tax increase if Proposition 1 were to pass, or about $22 a month of additional tax if that proposition were to pass. So that's kind of the starting point for that base Prop 1 plus EPC. And then going on from there, we kind of follow the same mechanics in terms of like the information we look at. So this is the updated scope that's inclusive of Prop 1 and 2, broken down by building, and then across the 8 ceilings for 8 projections. We put in this maturity schedule here, and then put it all back together, and then really getting into what that house page looks like for the Props 1 and 2. And again, this is all inclusive because you can't have Prop 2 without Prop 1. They'll be contingent on each other. So if Prop 1 and 2 were to pass for the $500,000 house, that basic star would be $519. So that's total, not $519 in addition to Prop 1. It's $519 total, or about $43 a month of tax increases for Prop 1 and 2. And then again, going through the same exercise with Prop 3 added in there, we break down the costs, look at the 8 ceilings, run the maturity schedule projections, and when we get to the house page there, looking at the $500,000 house, it'd be about $632 for a basic star homeowner, or about $52 a month in additional taxes needed. And then because we know that's a lot of information, we really tried to just pull it together into one summary page. You can kind of see it all side by side. So again, looking at this, you got the color coding there for each of the different props. Those numbers at the top again are not reflecting the EPC that's also in there. So that would be on top of that, but that's self-funding. In all these scenarios, we're getting 23% building aid ratio back, and then the bond percentage calculated based on how much of the work is aidable. And then again, down at the bottom of the page there, you can see side by side what those tax increases for each proposition would be. And again, those are all in for each of those scenarios, not kind of additive on top of each other. And it's also probably worth pointing out that we assume for this report 5% and 6% for note and bond rates, which is somewhat conservative in today's market. You're probably issuing, if you're issuing today, you're probably closer to like mid-4s as the numbers. There's certainly some cushion built in there. So potentially these numbers could turn out better if rates kind of hold out. But we try to build some conservatism in so that we're kind of given hopefully a worst case scenario as we look at these projections. So
Now, are the capital reserves built into these numbers already?
Yep.
Where do I see?
highlighted right in the colors in the middle of the page there.
Okay,
So you got
Okay.
10 million in capital reserve that you're taking in, and $1.5 million of fund balance is the current.
but that was in the numbers when it's estimating the cost per house.
Yep.
Okay.
So that the 11.5 million is contemplated in all these scenarios. You'd be putting in 11.5 million in cash and just financing the difference.
Okay.
And I just back on the bar chart here, since we didn't really cover it, you can kind of see, out into the future, there will be some drop offs as some of that existing debt drops off. So that would be, as you start to think about long-term planning, that's where maybe there's some opportunities, a few years down the road, if there is, some of that deferred scope or additional needs to come up, that's where you start to look at that more frequent planning, trying to do smaller projects every 5 to 7 years instead of, one larger project every 20 years or so, and having these increases and everything, so.
Yeah.
So I know it's kind of a lot of information we went through quickly. Are there any questions on any of that, or anything you'd like us to go into in further detail?
Did you guys on the committee have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, to Elliot's point, and we've spent a lot of time identifying needs, wants, everything else. I mean, you put up a $14 million number before, but over the 2 years of us looking at it, it was probably 3 times that. So, there's a lot of wants, but there's definitely a lot of needs. So we have to prioritize those.
No, I mean, and honestly, I think everybody put a lot of work into. Really, the marching orders are, this is for everybody. This isn't just for our students. Not to make, new offices. It's not to make, whatever. This is to help the businesses that we keep people here. It's, what the first thing parents say when they go to buy a house is, how are the schools? I mean, this is everything that, in my opinion, everything in those 3 propositions is something that makes Millbrook better. Whether it's an energy dealing with energy, whether it's the air handling, whether it's safety, it makes Millbrook better. And better for everybody. So I think I like the way it was broken down. Very nice. Anybody else?
It makes a lot of sense tonight, and thank you for all of the time, administration and the committee members, and all the time you put into this.
Thank you for being patient, because I know this was a multi-year endeavor. Back in the fall of 21, the board asked, how do we do this capital project thing that was very foreign to so many of us? And having the faith in us to take a couple of years to plan it really, and plan it properly. And to Caroline's point earlier, it's got to start and end with our kids. So we're not going to open up walls and ceilings unless impacts the children is in this process. And having our instructional leaders, Dr. Watkins and our principals involved, and everyone on the committee, it's been awesome to see it come together. And I just appreciate the board's trust and patience with us to get at least to this point.
And there's nothing that would stop us from, let's say, 4 years from now. If we round up a bunch of other DCS stuff, energy savings, whatever it is. There's nothing that would stop us from having a second project.
No, we could do it, we could put, so actually that's a really good kind of jump off point is. We did an off-cycle condition survey to establish our baseline, but our actual state mandated condition surveys do this spring. So Mr. Reddick and his team from BVS are gonna come back 2 years after they came the first time, and we're gonna crawl through all of our buildings, top to bottom again. Take into consideration whatever we authorize to go out to the public and whatever the voters support, but we're already this spring gonna be updating those lists to what we need the next time. Whether that's a bonded project, whether we're able to squirrel away a little bit more cash, as we talked about in our budgeting process, we have to budget for every possible outcome during the school year. And when not all those things come to fruition, we have a little bit left over. And so between what we can manage out of that, if there's an opportunity for more energy savings projects, we can explore that as well. So we really do want to get to a place where, much like many of our neighbors, Millbrook becomes the type of district that every couple of years takes another bite of the apple, and it's minimal impact to the taxpayers because we're keeping that debt service level to Jason's point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we waited 62 years to do most of this stuff. We can't do that again. That's as simple as it gets. So we gotta, plan it out
Agreed.
much better.
Agreed. And there's stuff, I think Joe Reddick can tell you, him and I have had discussions about the next 7 to 10 years of things that we already see coming. That's not worth discussing today, but there's no shortage of more stuff that in the next 5 to 7 years, we're already looking at age and expected lifespan for other things, building systems and all of that.
And 5 years is a good number. You hear about a lot because, the building condition survey is done every 5 years. So you have kind of a fresh look at what your needs are. And then your maximum cost allowance is reset every 5 years. So they do like a rolling look at that, which is a little bit less of an issue for you because you're a lower building in ratio, 23%. It's not as impactful as if you're 70, 80, 90%, but it's still, not nothing. That helps if you can get a quarter of the cost paid for by the state. So a lot of times people look at, 5-year intervals that they try to, stretch out those votes so that you can kind of get that fresh look and that reset on the aid side. So that's like a good target as you look at kind of long-term planning.
So we just need to make sure we're holding enough money to cover all of the mandates that come out of Albany. That never have any funding with them. I don't sound disgruntled.
Positive outlook, that's.
All right,
Ellen, I have a question or listening, or you may get this question in the meetings, the firehouse meetings. So if Prop 1, 2, and 3 pass, will all of those items, what is the timeline? Are all of those items gonna be worked on
Joe said he can have them done in like 3 months.
day one, or is it probably
Great
one,
question. So there's some things.
then 2, then 3?
Our scheduling is a big part of this, okay, so, I'll try to, sometimes I go way too deep into these things, I'm gonna try to keep it real basic. The school year calendar impacts our timelines, availability of labor and materials affects our timelines, and the usage of the thing. So I'll use the heating system as an example, right? We're gonna try to build the new heating system in parallel to the old one and schedule it that way, so we bring the new one as close to online ready as possible. The old one, and we do it over a summer, where we don't need to make heat. So that kind of makes sense. We can't attack instructional spaces during the school year, so a lot of this is focused on summer work. But as we get into the schematic design phase and we prepare for bids, timeline is very much a part of that, and I'll be working with Joe on that.
Can I?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, yeah, once the propositions are established and set, now we can start talking about how we get scheduled. Because otherwise it's all just up in the air, you can't really get our arms around it, but now we know that this is what it is. We can begin to discuss that, so, like Elliot said, you're bound by school year and occupancy. You're bound by what spaces can perhaps be given up over the school year to be worked on. That's a good thing. So the work continues through the school year. It's not just set for each summer. You might need to move certain programs around to accommodate construction. So that, putting all that together, working with the building principals and the district administration to see how we could do that, with your construction manager also. It gets very detailed, and usually what you'll see is a multi-phase bond. Okay, we're gonna have phase 1 first year is gonna be X. Phase 2 second year is gonna be Y. So phase 3. So we'll get to work on that with the construction manager and the school district. Yeah, once we get this settled.
But
But
to
it's-
answer your question, it's
Right.
not Prop 1
Right.
and then Prop 2.
Right.
It's what makes sense in the, like the large scope of the entirety of the project,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, 'cause
There's
like the
things,
greenhouse in Prop 3 could be built.
right,
first.
Yes.
That
it
doesn't really
doesn't
affect anyone.
matter.
So
It's not
it-
contingent upon anything else
depends.
being ready,
Makes
right?
sense.
Whereas the heating for the labs, which is Prop 2 right now, the science labs. Whenever they're going in underneath and doing that project, right, they're doing that all together regardless of where that falls in terms of
Yeah, I
prioritization.
just did that.
Mics are back on. Sorry about that. For those watching at home, we had a technical issue. We are back. And the question is the actual, Prop 1 is actually gonna be asked on this next page. So, I will try to rephrase that answer as well as it was stated while we were offline. 11.5 million of that would be funded in cash through our capital reserves and fund balance allocations. 6 million of that would be self-funded through the energy performance contract. Roughly 19 million of that would also be, as Mr. Schwartz spoke to, old debt coming off the books, and the new debt kind of replacing it. So there would be a neutral impact to the taxpayer for that. So that's 19, 6 and 11.5. So we're just at about 26 million in asking the taxpayers of that 52. So really cutting that number in half. We're asking the taxpayers to take on 26 million in new debt, essentially, out of that 52.
And is this state aid figured into those numbers? The 20.
Well, then 23% would come back to us.
The 23% would be off of everything, because you get the 23,
Right.
you get the state aid on your cash contributions as well, or the, so that's coming on everything, so that's.
But in the numbers that you guys put out there is the state aid.
$269 for the $500,000 house, that's factoring in all those pieces, that factors in all the pieces that are coming in to offset, as Elliot just laid out, plus the building aid that you're getting back.
Okay.
So it's all baked into it when you come up to that $269 tax increase for Prop 1 for a $500,000 star house.
And I'll just add to that, when we built Prop 1, we started this conversation asking Jason and his team if they would tell us what scope number would be budget neutral or tax neutral. And it was roughly 25 million, right, between the EPC and the old debt. And honestly, we just, there's no way to trim Prop 1 any more than it already is without completely like letting go of a full building worth of work. You know, and so I'll say this for the board's benefit and for anybody listening at home. We didn't want to get halfway home when we're dealing with stuff that hasn't been touched in 60 years. So really, as a committee, I feel like the consensus point was we're all in or we're all out in these big chunk things. So like if we're gonna renovate Elm Drive, we're gonna renovate it, you know, every aspect of that piece of how the building breathes. And that includes, you know, if we're dealing with moisture mitigation, that includes the drainage, right? There's groundwater that comes into the tunnels. So part of the scope is, you know, making sure that there's no groundwater seepage into the building, making sure that the roof is tight, the windows are tight, and then upgrading how the building breathes, because all of that stuff is kind of related together and there's no easy way to disentangle it. And so Prop 1 seems like a big number. I think Jason did a great job of explaining how we try to mitigate that impact to the taxpayer as much as we can. But I just wanted to be, you know, full disclosure, because some of our taxpayers do live in municipalities that touch multiple school districts, and then you hear a lot of that tax neutral or minimal tax impact. And then believe me, we tried. But with 60 years of needs snowballing, there was no way to get there. And this is the most fiscally responsible way we can package it in a way that meets our present day needs and sets us up for, you know, the next 20 to 30 years with these respective systems. I mean, we do this right, we don't have to touch a lot of this stuff for 20 plus years. So, and I think, you know, Joe's design team has really taken that point home. This is like a once in a career thing. All these things that we're talking about, we want to do it once, do it right, and have it perpetuate for the next 20 to 30 years. Because there's other things we need to do in that time frame.
Other questions?
Just to comment, you don't have to do this, but when I was looking at the regional comparisons, because the school sizes are so vastly different, it may be helpful to look at the cost per student. Just a comment, you don't have to do it.
That's a good point. And again, right, it's hard to say, because you could look at it by student, you could look at it by
Right.
square footage. I'll put it back up on the screen.
Or square footage,
know,
right?
And age and condition, and it's challenging to go apples to apples.
Yep, yep.
For sure. But I think for me personally, it was telling to see how the numbers evolve from 10-year look back to 5-year look back
For sure.
in terms of just, you know, because I look at it kind of similar to your point, Chris. I look at it and I'm like, all right, so that district's 4 times our size. So should we have done a quarter of what they did? Maybe we did 10% of what they did. You know?
This is only a 10-year look back, and like we had said before, we haven't done really much in 60 years. So if you want a 60-year look back, that would open up.
Capital, you'd have.
Well, I think,
High school and wings.
Yeah.
No, but still.
I
In
think the,
comparison,
obviously.
I think you also
Don't
look
get
at
across.
what they're going, the other districts are going out for.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I
I
think that
mean,
even the average, right, of the
Correct.
last 10 years, if you look at the average school, of the school districts up there,
Mhm.
right, $415 million throughout the county in 5 years, and we're responsible for 1 million of that. So the other 414 is our neighboring districts.
And it's gonna be, you know, I don't know if Perry said it or somebody said it on this side, but we're gonna see other districts start to publish and publicize their proposals for May. And unfortunately, and I'm sure Jason and Joe could certainly speak to this, the cost of everything is we're gonna see some pretty big numbers. I kind of, full disclosure, I wanted to share what everybody else is looking to do. But those are still confidential for some of our neighboring districts, and they would prefer us not to share that publicly until they're ready, and I totally respect that. But I
honestly,
think-
we have to sell this on what it means to Millbrook.
Mhm.
You know, what Arlington's gonna put into their buildings and districts and, you know. I don't know if that's really has a huge bearing on what our taxpayers can handle. And what is needed in Millbrook.
Right, I think it's just important to note though that it's normal to be going out and doing this work. And to get into like that responsible, like Jason said, like maybe a 5 to 7 year cycle, getting into a responsible pattern of work so that we're never in this situation again, where we have to have a conversation about, you know, a number this high with our taxpayers, because we don't want to have to do that, right? But these are things that have to be done so that we can open our buildings responsibly.
I'll just say, to Elliot's point, I mean, in my experience, I've been doing this for 14 years now, and I mean, when we started, it was, you know, I feel like most projects were in like that, you know, high single digits to 10, 15 million. Now it's, you know, blink of an eye, it's 25 to 35 million is like a minimum project in most districts. It's what we're seeing these days. So just rising cost of construction, aging infrastructure that needs more replacement. You're starting to see it more and more, you know, larger projects throughout the state.
Which leads into the next, my question, because somebody's gonna ask it when we go around, so I might as well. How do we handle, assuming this all passes, how do we handle, cost, overruns?
So if you look at the last pages of Jason's handout, you see the worksheet that was provided by Colombo. And these numbers are inclusive of cost escalation inclusion. So for an example, you might see a line item might be $450,000 in construction costs, but the bottom line is closer to $700,000. And that includes contingencies, allowances, and escalation, because we know that we're gonna vote May of 24, and that project may very well not be completed until summer of 26. And our design team and our estimators have built all of that into our plans. That's a great point to bring up.
But also, God forbid, there's material shortages and things go crazy like during COVID, which will probably overcost the estimates.
Sure, and then that's when, you know, the good thing is we have time in between, so that if we need to ask the voters to authorize additional funds, or we need to adjust scope, we have time to do that. And then part of us, and I don't know if Joe, you want to speak to how we structure the bids. But we do have options in bid structuring where we can include certain things as add alternates or deduct alternates to give us flexibility in bid award. Should the bids come back high, we can dial the scope back in that process.
Yeah, so all the estimates are based on the scope that we put together, and, you know, what happens is, you know, once the bond passes, and we get into actual design of spaces, is something, a phenomenon called scope creep. And, you know, clients say, oh, yeah, well, can we add that over there? Can we add that over there? Well, no, not really, because those things have cost, but no, that's what we really need to have it work right. Okay, So that could be an ad alternate. So we protect the budgets through bid alternates. So, you know, the base bid is the base work that was estimated here by Palumbo and with our assistance. And so between the two firms, we have so many decades of experience in estimating these things successfully. So we'll protect the budget with ad alternates. And, you know, and like I said, it's going to be multi-year phasing for this work. Because you can't just give up all your buildings at one time to rip everything apart and do all this work. It's impossible. There's not enough labor out there. You can't handle being out of all of your buildings out there. It's not feasible. But so as things goes on, you know, we'll see phase one. Okay, phase one came in $2 million on the budget. Great. All right, phase two came in 1.5 billion over budget. Okay, well, that's not great, but we're still 500 in the black going into the next phase. So we get to watch it and we get to tailor each successive phase accordingly. So that's actually a plus to multi-phasing because you get to do that. You can tailor it along the way to the budget. So far, anything crazy like COVID and these shortages again, you know, we think these are good numbers.
Thank you.
Anybody else? So Dina, I'd do a straw poll of, so we can hopefully give these guys some direction. What's your take on the proposals, Prop 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, I think the subcommittee and admin did a great job. It's really just like the bare bones infrastructure that's required, and I completely support how it's been divided within each prop.
Very good. Howard?
No, I agree with Dina that, and thank you to all the hard work that the subcommittee and has done with our contractor at this point. So yes, I think it's reasonable and we should move forward.
Good. Yeah.
I think we did a great job.
I just said that.
I thank myself and these guys for all the hard work.
When you kept saying everybody except one.
No, one thing I would say is thank God. Well, I could be, thank God we are addressing this now, because I cannot imagine what would happen. You know, you see stuff on the news about the schools falling apart, and I wish it had been done before. I do think it was tough, really drilling down, but I think, Prop 1, I wish we could put more in it.
Yeah.
But it's just, it has to get done. It has to.
Chris?
Thank you again, everyone. I'm in support of the
You don't have
landscape.
to be nice, just give.
No, it's not that often, right?
David? Good, Chris? Yeah, very good. All right, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
The next steps will move forward with starting to finish our pre-referendum design and so working on marketing materials.
Good. All right, guys, thank you very much. Safe travel.
Yeah, drive safe.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Brad.
See you, Brad.
Thank you.
Sorry to talk so much.
Yeah. All right. For President and Vice President reports, the only thing I had was, just wanted to tell Dina what a great job. I got really good feedback from NISBA on the inputs that we gave. All of our stuff was approved and now hopefully, everything will get back to normal, but right now, it looks like this election thing is still gonna cause us trouble. Anyway, Chris, you got anything?
I was gonna thank the facilities team and the admin, but I think we've done that enough tonight for all the hard work.
But they thank themselves.
Yeah, that's true. She beat me to it.
Okay,
Okay, so good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank you to our board members. It is Board Appreciation Recognition Month. And we are celebrating you all tonight with a small thank you from the administrative team to you all. But I think that, you know, for whoever is listening, they should understand that it is not just 2 meetings a month. That's a lot of your time anyway. But there's also committee meetings, right? There's these subcommittee meetings, there's district events that you all are present at. So it is a lot of time that you spend away from your families for the benefit of this district and city. So thank you. And I hope that if you see our board members out and about, that you thank them as well for the job that they do. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Absolutely. In terms of instruction, we have some exciting information. Dr. Watkins visited with Mount St. Mary's College, a school partnership opportunity where they discussed really how to keep people in the field, how to bring people into education, how to help them be supported and retain them within the field. And so they're looking at a certified apprentice program where these folks would go to school in the evening, they would take their classes, but during the day, they would be working on campus, observing and co-teaching with existing educators so that they have the benefit of really seeing different teaching styles and learning the craft with a lot of support and hands-on experiences in a classroom, right? It's sort of like, I know every teacher that came up through these preparation programs, then they get in their classroom and it's kind of like, you got the job, so now what, right? So this will really help to have people enter their first independent teaching opportunity feeling prepared and confident that they can do the job and that they can stay with this career. It is a wonderful career, but you know, without support, it can also be very challenging, especially in your early years. Additionally, in instruction, we have the National Theater for Children in partnership with Central Hudson that presented to our elementary students on energy efficiency. So a lot of that sustainability work, you know, happening in our schools as well, just educating students on how to be more energy efficient. We also had our Elm Drive classes visit the Millbrook Public Library this past week, and coming up on this Friday, the 27th, our high school students in 10th grade specifically will be taking the PSAT exams. So that's our instructional updates. In terms of operations, over the past couple of weeks, we've been doing our evacuation drills with the Millbrook Fire Department. So we have actually been looking at response times, et cetera, but we also had them visit here and conduct presentations for fire prevention, fire safety, and gave students an opportunity to explore fire trucks with the Touch a Truck program. So that's really exciting for our students, especially, you know, our little ones. It's a really big deal for them to be able to see a real life fire truck up close and be able to kind of explore that. So I think that's awesome that they're able to do that for our students. And I know that the kids just absolutely love it. So I appreciate the fire department for partnering up with us in that way. In terms of other operations and issues, just to be transparent with the board, is we are having issues at the high school with our heating control system. So there is heat. The heat is functioning, but it does require a manual set programming manually to make sure that the building temperatures, you know, rise, and then shutting it off to make sure that they don't go too high. It's not an efficient way to do this, but it is the only way at this point to be able to provide heating for our students at the high school. So as we talk about capital projects, the control system at the high school is already past its expected life. And so these are the things that we have to be mindful of. This is the reality that we face, and that is our newest building, right? But the control system is still out of date. So just to be mindful as we have these conversations, it's out of necessity that we have to do some of this work. So in other news, Alden Place enjoyed their first of 7 mindful moments that will take place throughout the school year. So that is with a yoga studio who's come in to teach students how to be mindful, how to, you know, really center themselves and be able to manage stress, emotions, and whatever may come up for them. The PTO is also hosting an Elm Alden Halloween movie night on October 30th, immediately following school dismissal. So you can find out more from your individual buildings if you are interested in having your child attend that. And the fall sports season is wrapping up. Volleyball and cross-country teams will be moving on to sectional play, so that's really exciting. And the Council for Addiction Prevention and Education did presentations today, so Samantha will be talking about that as well, and the Talcott presentation, which was super informative for families and students last week. We have 2 upcoming events, both on October 30th. Like I had said, that PTO is having a Halloween themed movie night, and Samantha will be hosting the first of the advisory council meetings, and she'll talk more about that. I did want to recognize Ken McPherson. He is a math teacher at our high school, and he was recognized by the University of Chicago as an outstanding educator. So congratulations to Ken. And also Joe Carbone, last weekend was recognized for the work that he does in supporting and recognizing our veterans on an annual basis. So recognition for Mr. Carbone, absolutely warranted. He does wonderful things. He never asks for, any attention about it, but he absolutely deserves it because he really does go out of his way to honor those that have served our country. So kudos to Mr. Carbone and Mr. McPherson. And that is what I have for you.
Very good. Questions?
No, that's great. Those two.
Yeah, congratulations. I have 2. Speaking of veterans, I know there's an upcoming breakfast. Do we know how many staff, employees that are veterans?
We have some, yes.
Okay, so we're aware.
And yes, and we do
Okay.
include them.
Okay.
Some of them I think are a little bit more private
Sure.
and don't necessarily choose to be out there,
Yeah.
and some of them do participate.
Okay, but we are. aware. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. And then the other thing, I know the bad M word was mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
So the capital project obviously will address that mitigation. But for right now, do we do annual screening at the beginning of the school year? It's been very wet.
It has, we've had a couple of minor observances that have been
Mhm.
tested and kind of checked out and everything was okay. Mold is the kind of thing that exists all the time. It comes from decaying plant matter outside, for those that don't know, maybe listening at home. And so when we do interior mold testing, we're always measuring interior levels versus outside levels, right? And then what you want is any levels of detected inside to be at or less than what's outside, neutral to the environment, right? If it spikes inside, you're growing it inside. And so we would not test unless there was an observance, whether that's a visual observance or smell, or any sort of like that mustiness, like whatever cause for alarm, there might be a cause for concern, we would go in and test it through spore traps or physical samples. What we are doing though is really John and his team are managing our heating and ventilation, prevents the environment that would foster growth. Mold needs moisture, it needs cool, it needs dark, it needs wet. So we're doing the things to mitigate moisture in the buildings, to keep the temperatures at the appropriate levels, to stop pulling in outside air at the wrong time of day. So in the pre-dawn hours, when the relative humidity is 98%, we don't really want to be bringing that air into the buildings when there's nobody here. So it's really being addressed behaviorally right now. And the hope is that with the new systems, we'll be able to automate a lot of that monitoring and air conditioning sense to preclude any conditions that would foster mold.
Thanks.
Others? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I would also like to thank board members for your dedication and time you put into the Middleburg Central School District. It doesn't go unnoticed and it's very appreciated. I know you had the opportunity to review my agenda, so I'll keep it short and sweet, and just highlight a few student services updates. So to start, for school counseling, our advisory council will take place on October 30th. And through that time, we will review the school counseling plan to discuss our roles of the school counselor, school data summary, school counseling goals and program map, and NCSS for school counseling. For spring 2024, as you know, we have our college and career fair. We're also adding a trades and a farmers and producers fair to participate in that event this spring. As for grant funding, you'll notice that we have a lot of grants that are funding our CAPE counselor, our ASER social worker, our Obea's bullying prevention program. and our professional development for teachers, called Listen. We thank MEF for funding half of that course series, staff PD, to ensure that our LGBTQ students can learn and grow in a school environment that's free from bullying and harassment. As for social emotional learning, we do have a lot of character education programs and assemblies that are scheduled for this year. We had our recent parent webinar that took place last Thursday on October 19th on drug trends hiding in plain sight. That was provided by Tallcott. So I thank you for all those participants who attended that presentation. There were a lot of questions that were very informative and some great responses from our presenter, Jermaine Galloway, who also shared some upcoming dates for his company where he'll have more webinars that'll take place. And also he shared some people who work with his company who can actually provide drug awareness presentations for our students. As you can see on my agenda, I do have a lot of upcoming dates that surround drug awareness. And we had a recent presentation on drug awareness today provided by our Cape counselor, Mrs. Boulian, who provided the presentation for 6th through 8th graders and 9th through 12th. So 2 separate presentations that were on vaping and drug awareness. And students participated in discussions along with the presentation provided by our Cape counselors. So that was great to have somebody in-house provide insights to our students so that the students know that they are a constant resource who they can reach out to if they have any questions, comments, concerns, or need any supports. And this week, I know Mrs. Carnecchia, you had asked what Red Ribbon Week is. It's Drug Prevention Week essentially, and Mrs. Boulian in support with administration are promoting essentially a Spirit Week that stands by substance abuse prevention. And yesterday we had Crazy Sock Day. Today, as you can see, administrators and teachers are wearing red to support drug prevention. Tomorrow's Jersey Day. Thursday is going to be Tie-Dye Day. And then Friday is School Spirit Day. So we're keeping the spirit alive, but we're trying to bring in different categories for supporting School Spirit Week. And this week is drug prevention. That's what I have for you for student services.
Thank you.
Questions?
I just had a comment. Some of us had the opportunity to meet Ms. Goulian from Cape, and I'm really excited about that. She seems to want to be really accessible, not just to students, but also to parents. And she's really putting herself and her contact information out there so everyone can take that opportunity if they need to in a more confidential setting and reach out. Doesn't just have to be a student in the high school.
She's very passionate and dedicated, and we really appreciate that she's extending that support to community resources. In addition to PTO, so we appreciate that acknowledgement.
And Tallcott was great. More parents should look for that the next time. It opens your eyes to a lot of things, so I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you. We're trying to include more virtual presentations as, you know, I've received feedback on parents commenting that they need support with childcare, so that's why they can't come to our in-house presentation. So, you know, we want families to know that we're listening, we're hearing, and we're providing these opportunities, and we'll love to see more cases participate in future events.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Samantha.
Thank you.
All right, final financials and warrants. Do I have a motion to adopt resolution?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll
Second.
second. Fine.
Okay.
Okay, questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. Any against? Okay, public comments?
No.
Okay. Data committee,
The data committee met, it went over some very high level data. This was actually quite a while ago, and I'm forgetting some of what we talked about. I'm just trying to pull up the. So the data committee did meet, as well as the technology committee. Actually, all of these committees that are here have met in cycles. So the data committee talked about high level data. It talked about, you know, district data over time. One of the things that we've been having a conversation about in terms of the data committee is what data do we want to look at, right? I think this data is slightly disconnected from the data that we use on a daily basis. So it's a lot of summary data. And I think that one of the things that we had a conversation about as an administrative team and with board leadership is this the most efficient way to look at what the district purpose is, right? So really honing in on the processes that we use around data has sort of been where the conversation has shifted. Some of this is data that is kind of based on previous years or previous, happenstance. And I don't know as though prospectively that is really informative to what we need to be doing and how we've been shifting our practices to include things like MTSS, what Samantha had spoken about, the multi-tiered systems of support and collecting all sorts of data. And really, as an administrative team, we've been having a conversation about the fact that, so we have all this data, what are we doing with it? And how do we make this a part of, daily functioning as opposed to these large scale data sets that sure, they have value and they mean something, right? But are they really what's going to change the trajectory of any child's life throughout the district? So we've been having that conversation in so much as this was a board committee, right? We had a data committee. But I don't know as though it's had a clear direction or focus over time. So that would be very helpful to come to an agreement about what you'd like to hear and say. I will go in order.
See, I don't think from the data committee, at least from my standpoint, it wasn't like what data we want to see. What do we think, or what do we hope we can tell from data? Like the one I always go back to is we added pre-K and have the students that are entering kindergarten, have they actually seen a bump up? And I don't know what data, because the data that we looked at was fairly high level. And was sort of an initial swag. The board, at least in my opinion, the board needs to see more things like, is that working? We went to a new math program. Is it working? Are we getting better math grades or is it tanking? And not to go say, well, all right, then we know who that caused that problem. We need to be able to say, well, we made an investment there. Do we continue that or do we shift it to something else? To me, that was the most important point that was made in the data committee meeting was, Evan took us through a bunch of charts of data and, bar charts and stuff. And one of the biggest mistakes we made in the past was putting up a bar chart that has, a dip in it, and everybody goes, what caused that? I mean, we don't know. Well, it could have been the kids that didn't, there's 50-60% of the kids don't even participate.
Right.
In the test. It could have been a new group of kids. If we can't explain it, if we don't really fully understand it, the data is not all that useful.
I agree with you. And so I feel like data is most beneficial in identifying questions to ask, right? And to try and create a picture of what hypothesize, right? To hypothesize what could the problem of practice be and to start targeting those things. I don't know that you're going to look at one data set and have the answers to.
You can identify trends too through data.
You can, but I would say that a lot of the high level data that we have is very flawed. We literally have in some cases like a 52% participation rate. And so we don't really know. So we're making these assumptions, right? By looking at those high level data sets, we're making assumptions about truths that maybe are not true at all. And so what it looks like very differently in the MTSS process is we're looking at individual students and we're saying, okay, so, Jen Carnecchia got a 2 on her math assessment. But then we're looking at the classroom grades and we're looking at other metrics that we use to measure her performance in math. And we're like, well, actually that 2 was an outlier for her. And oh, by the way, maybe her dog died that day and she came, very unprepared for that test, right? So we're triangulating data and making more informed decisions about what we do next. We're also not just looking at one child, but we're looking across the roster and saying for this standard, right? 95% of the kids got it. you know, a couple of the kids might need some reinforcement. Okay, we're doing great with that standard, right? And then this standard, whoo,
Right.
40% of them got it, right? So we're able to shift our practices in response to the data.
My take is don't get carried away trying to. Like, all right, we got data, let's go, you know, let's go show it to the board, hey, look at the board, hey, we're having. If it takes us 4 years to say, okay, we have data on a bunch of kids, we now can tell. When little Joe in second grade is exhibiting behavior that is probably gonna cause trouble in physics in the high school. Maybe we can do something to help that student along the way. Same thing with, you know, if we're investing in classes, if we're investing in new curriculum. We should have data that says, or something that says. Yes, we need to make a change here, you know, that IB thing. I mean, we didn't really look at the data from that for years. Only to realize that nobody was getting an IB diploma. And they weren't really comfortable with the material. But that's to me where the data has to go. And, you know, if we start throwing bar charts out in front of the board or throwing bar charts out, you know, in the, is there a Poughkeepsie Journal anymore? But, you know, like they used to say, oh, look at Millbrook's, you know, top in the county and, you know,
Right.
what does
and-
that even mean?
Right, and of the students who took those exams, right? And so that's one thing, and the other thing really is that there's no correlation between their performance on 3 through 8 testing and their performance on the regions, which comes later, right? Both supposedly aligned with the standards, they actually don't have a correlational value to one another. So it's really those local assessments that are aligned to the standards, that are aligned to the projected outcomes that we want for students. It's going to be the work that we're doing to having those common assessments to be able to say predictably, right, like where a child would perform on these assessments before they even take them, because a lot of students don't take them, right? So we'll be able to collect that data that's reliable across the board. We now have a fully aligned P12 math curriculum. We're working on curriculum-based measures within the ELA classroom so that we can do the same thing in parallel. So that's the data that we rely on. It's just not the data that's published outwardly.
The other thing that bothered me, and maybe it was the tech committee, I'm getting the two mixed up, but. The parent portal, or is it
Yes.
that like 30% of our parents had actually signed up for it? I mean, this is where we had talks about truancy and not just, you know, all day truancy, but skipping classes and. All this stuff that now we do have the data, we have it in a place that parents can log on and check it out. And I was really disappointed to see. That we are less than I wanna say 27 sticks in my mind, but it could be wrong. But it was a very low number, for us to be middle to late October. And have that few parents connected to that portal is, and I'm. You know, I offered up if there's anything that we can do, if we, you know, I don't know. But that was the one thing that really bothered me in all that discussion was why aren't, you know, that should be close to 100%.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we had said was, why could that be, right? Is that a true number? So, to use, you know, Chris LaBelle as an example, if she signed up for her one child at Alden Place, that also gives her access to her child in the middle school.
Yeah.
But does that only count once for one of the kiddos? And so is the number actually only 30% of our parents? Or is it, you know, 30% responses, but it actually covers many more students in that? So, you know, we've been having those conversations. I know Evan's been looking into the validity of that, you know, percentage kind of thing.
And it's also need-based, so we all know people tend not to do things until they really need information, so the first report card is.
And we talked about that when it comes up, right?
Yeah.
Probably have
You'll
a
see a big
participation, yeah.
There's probably a way to find out who's not attached to something and really
In
just
the,
email
and
them
maybe-
instead of the whole district.
and maybe through their child's, at least the element. Well, middle and high school, they have a lot of teachers, right? right? But pre-K through 5, having that one teacher. I know myself as a parent, if an email comes from a teacher, I'm gonna open it, right? So maybe utilizing.
As opposed to if it comes from
I
us.
always open it.
Is that what you're saying?
Other people. And then, just a comment about, data, if you're really trying to look at more micro scale, like individual children or classroom. You know, you really can, you have an expert that you're contracted with, your certified behavior analyst, I mean, they're trained to do that, so. You know, I'd recommend utilizing that person as well.
Thank you for that.
And I wanted to mention, so one of the things about the portal, I initially, in my own experience, did not receive a key, or I did not notice that I had received a key. So when I reached out, I was given a key. That key did not work. I had to reach back out. So in some instances, it might be a hurdle. Someone else might give up and say, I'll just email or I'll look at the notices. In the end, I was able to do it for both my children, but that could be part of it. And then just about data, one of the NISBA resolutions was for the New York State to see if the Regents exams taken by computer versus paper was better, and to do research into that. And so that got me thinking if our own district might have any research, whether overall, if there was a time when it was just by paper, or the students who just did it by hand versus on a computer, overall would be different. And in addition to that, by students, so the students did it by paper, but then the next year they did it by computer, maybe those results were different. I don't know if we have it in the record.
I don't off the top of my head, but I mean, even in just saying that, right, we're comparing the same kids, but 2 different tests, right? Different learning experiences, a year apart, you know, it's hard to say, is it the content or is it the means through which they took the exam? Like, we can look at it, right? But I think that it only presents more questions for us to answer if we see the value in doing so. And so the fact that some of these exams are going to be required to be computer-based, I don't know if that's really where we need to put our effort, right? We can look at it. I don't know that it's gonna do anything for us if we're required to administer them on the computer.
That was my question. If they're gonna actually be required, in the past, was there an option, or it was also?
Well,
required?
in the distant past, it was all paper, and then it was like transitional, and then the expectation in the future will be that they'll be computer-based.
An instructional question for Amy, and you can say, we'll talk about that next meeting if you need to, but with Howard's bringing up the textbook made me think about this. So from one year, we moved from Eureka to Eureka Squared. Then I'm thinking, so that made me think about our children, their report cards versus the standardized tests, right? There's the New York State standardized test, but then we're also assessing on IXL. Are either of those standardized mechanisms, the New York State test and IXL, aligned with, just take math, for example, are they aligned with Eureka Squared?
Well, that's all aligned to the standards, and that was the big push for this.
Okay.
And so the elementary report card is now, it'll look different this year. It's very lengthy and meaty, but it's aligned to the state standards.
Okay. So then if let's say because I know there's different reasons a child might receive AIS or MTSS. If there's a big discrepancy between, say, child classroom performance and then the standardized test, whichever way, the discrepancy could be either way. Is the AIS or MTSS ever targeting intervention for the standardized test? So I guess I'm looking at it, I have given you the direction I'm looking at it. Child performs really well in school, but on the standardized tests, their score is very low.
So every, like those snapshot exams, we do look at them as snapshots versus the longevity of multiple grades and opportunities for students to demonstrate
Mhm.
proficiency and mastery in a particular skill. So it is a piece of the puzzle, but it isn't the only thing that we look at to make a decision. I think the goal that we're really pushing, and I'm excited, hopefully, very looking forward to with the MTSS system that we're still building within Synergy is while we've always collected data on what students are doing in a WIN group and in their AIS group, it's really having all of that information in one place so that many eyes can have conversations about that progress a student's making. And if the student is making slow progress, but not at the rate of others, the question can be had much earlier to say, so should we keep doing the same thing, or is there something different that we should be doing to support them in that growth? Versus waiting for a state test or the middle of the year IXL exam or the end of the year. So those are benchmark type exams where the MTSS system is meant to do that progress monitoring in shorter increments of time. So that 8 to 10 week matter of looking at what progress has the student made. And they're not expected to make grade level in 10 weeks, but if a student has gotten the support they need, and I'll use Elm as an example because they're really focusing on the decoding. And I'm very proud of the work that the teachers are doing there is identifying students that have trouble with the CVC or trouble with certain vowel teams. And so they're getting that really targeted intervention. And then they're doing weekly progress monitoring to see how those students are doing. So they might not need to stay in that group. So there's fluidity to it. Where it can turn out that an AIS type of thing is like a life sentence, right? And we want it to be more targeted, focused, and see if the intervention that we're providing is making a difference.
And the more alignment we bring in with like the curriculum, like we've talked about Eureka, right? We've talked about the standardized report card, like standard-based report card rather, and really aligning our instruction to that, the less likely we should be having those discrepancies. However, we are dealing with children, and those high stakes testing environments are very intimidating for kids, right? So is it that they don't know the material, or is it that they're stressed about the test? I mean, who knows, right? The narrative that they have going through their head when they sit down for that experience rather than in the classroom where, you know, it's a welcoming environment. They feel comfortable there. They can, you know, take risks in that environment without feeling the pressure of it. So, you know, sometimes there's a little bit of that too. So that's where we want to say, no, they know how to do this, right? We've had the local assessment of this standard and they can absolutely do it.
Thank you.
For sure.
Anything else? All right. Leadership.
Sure. So the district leadership team met. We did not have participation from anyone other than administration. So we actually tabled the meat of our discussion. More people can attend. And that is really focused pieces of our strategic plan slowly coming alive throughout the district. I know we've talked about a couple of things tonight that are in alignment with the strategic plan, but the district leadership team's work is really, you know, overview of the timeline. Amy and I have been working with a company called EAB, and they're partnering in the work in rolling out the strategic plan throughout the district and over the course of the next couple of years. So the district leadership team, we will have more information after next meeting. The safety committee has not met since the last time I spoke about it. But what has happened is we've had our first large scale drill Elm Drive. Thank you to Mrs. O'Connell for being willing to do a reunification drill. I think I mentioned at last meeting, we had visitors from Putnam County Department of Health, as well as Wapato Central School District, John J. East Fishkill, came and observed our drill. So that's the biggest news from the safety team right now. There is a safety symposium next week. And also Millbrook has been asked to send a team for the advanced threat assessment training because of where we are sort of ahead of the curve in some of these safety and security efforts. We are being asked now to provide some support and training for other districts. So that's really exciting. I mean, I think that's a super big deal. And so that's it for safety. Technology met The technology committee met last Wednesday, I believe it was. And Mr. Kirsch had taken the lead on that. And in that meeting, he had highlighted some of the new technology that we have. For example, in this room here, we have a brand new Promethean board, which is an interactive panel display. And we had some teachers here talking about their experiences in using the Promethean board, talking about how it enhances their instruction, talking about all of the things that it can do. Mr. Hartwick is there, and the question is asked, great, so we have some of these, what's the plan, right, to continue to turn these over? And what do we do in the meantime, right? So if they don't have a Promethean board, they have a standard smart board setup, which you'll see over here. And that will remain until we have the replacement of the updated technology. And then we also talked about, now that we have this technology, what are we doing with it? And how are we making sure that it's enhancing instruction? So some of that turnkey training within the district, whether it's teachers or Mr. Kirsch doing it himself, there will be some program rolled out in the near future so that the technology that we have on campus can be utilized to maximize instruction and achievement for our students. So that was a bit of the conversation. We also talked about rolling out the digital fluency standards, which will be a requirement to be embedded in our curriculum maps and our instructional experiences for students. So that is sort of the next leg of the journey. We've been working on compiling all the things we're already doing and ideas for where we can link those standards, but it's really about formalizing it and doing an overlay on the curriculum maps that we have in existence. And the wellness committee also met, and Samantha's here. Do you want to do that, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. So our wellness committee, our next meeting is December 7th. We met last month. And we meet for a variety of different topics surrounding health and wellness. That are child nutrition, mental, emotional, physical health, and advocacy. And what we do is we split up our committee members into subcommittees where we can kind of have a variety of range of different topics that are discussed around health and wellness. And we bring it all back together as a team and discuss from what's a priority and what do we need to address immediately and how can we address those health and wellness needs. I'm really looking forward to our December 7th meeting because I've been having a few meetings with community resources surrounding health and wellness, like our Northern Dublin Coalition, who wants to discuss resources surrounding health and wellness in our communities. And also the food bank of the Hudson Valley. I know that our wellness committee for child nutrition explored backpacking for students for food and nutrition and maybe doing like weekend bags for families in need. Also connecting with United Way for families in need of donations for that we're coming to the holidays, we're coming to the colder weather where we need, some families might need these types of supports. So really bringing together our school community, but also community resources that can help us work with our families at a larger scale rather than just in Millbrook itself. So having these subcommittees are really helpful because it allows us to have a lot more team members participate and be able to reach different avenues of health and wellness support that are needed. And then we can kind of tackle a plan that we can eventually roll out in the district. And I'm also exploring maybe doing something as such of a wellness fair. So working with these subcommittees to come up with something that we can provide students and families with a wellness fair where there's different types of resources around health and wellness.
Thank you. I just have two more things in alignment with the committee meetings. Harry and I had spoken at our agenda setting meeting, and we talked about in the future, if it's okay with the board, we're going to be attaching sort of the minutes to the meeting. So you'll have a brief overview. Obviously, none of the confidential safety stuff will be included. So you'll have a brief overview of that so that then it's more of a, everybody can be involved and stay up to date on what the committees are doing. And then if you have any questions, we can just discuss it from there. So we feel like that's an efficient way to keep everybody fully informed about what's happening in committee meetings. And the other thing I wanted to say aligned to what Samantha was just talking about is I wanted to thank Dr. Watkins publicly because on behalf of the administrative team, she actually has been supporting the community refrigerator here. So at the Millbrook Library, there is a community refrigerator where community members can access any sort of pre-made meals. It can be, you know, very low prep meals or even just grocery items that they might need. So on behalf of the team, Dr. Watkins has taken the lead on that. So I do want to just say thank you publicly for her for doing that for our community.
Same.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, the enrollment numbers are there for your perusal. The incident report is there. I don't know if you have any questions on either that or the enrollment report. PTO.
Okay, so as Carolyn mentioned, there is the PTO movie night, which is completely PTO sponsored. It is free to watch Hotel Transylvania on October 30th from 3:30 to 5:30. Parents do need to sign the permission slip that the school provided or send a note that their child can attend. And also Elm students will be bused to Alden if you sign that permission slip. And is only open to Elm and Alden students. Okay. We are also helping to sponsor Croctoberfest this Thursday, October 26th from 1 to 2:15 to try the different foods brought in by students from different cultures, which is gonna be really exciting. Picture Day is for Alden is Friday, October 27th. Picture Day for Elm is Thursday. And the PTO is fully sponsoring an event I'm very excited about called Confidence and Motivation Through Sports, which is going to be presented at Alden for all the grades on December 15th by LMC Athletics with retired NBA player Tyler Lydon and his partner owner Justin Cooper. And not only are they going to show some basketball drills that students can do at home for the various age groups, but they're going to be speaking about confidence motivation through sports. As we know, sports help give children confidence amongst their peers out of trouble. And so they're going to be speaking about how to keep yourself motivated, even though not everyone might not make it to the NBA. And that is all for the PTO.
And Tyler Lydon is a local boy.
Yes, from Pine
Pine
Plains.
Plains,
Yes. I'm sorry. Actually, I did want to mention one thing. The PTO president is seeking to just want to mention that she wants to do more community-wide events, especially with the older buildings. So I rep for Alden and some of the parents and PTO reps for MMS and MHS would like to see some more school dances. So perhaps at our next PTO meeting, as an administrator will be there, we can see the logistics of how to get that done.
Cool.
Will there be snacks served at the movie?
Yes, yes, I'm going to go buy them.
But you won't be there. 'Cause you can't.
I'll be there at pickup. I might have to arrive early.
Just remember, I don't say blah, blah, blah.
I know.
Love that movie. All right, MEF.
Yes, well, as Samantha mentioned, MEF recently funded, is happy to fund $10,000 towards the Listen professional development training 4 series. And this is not just for LGBTQ students, but so every student in our district can feel, can experience that culture of care and belonging. And once all the professional development is done, then I believe there's opportunities for student training to occur. Is that correct?
I scheduled student training for April.
Okay, great, thank you.
And we're doing 8th and 11th grade this year.
Okay,
So there'll be character ed programs, for small groups so that it's more interpersonal. That I'll touch on these topics, but we want to train the staff first so that they can support with that.
of course, thank you. And then we do have 3 resignations coming up on MEF at the end of the calendar year. So for folks listening, we're seeking more people to join.
Yeah, and I would say too, even if you have like a good idea of somebody that you think might be interested, and like, please let us know, because we can always reach out to them if they maybe don't have the confidence to initiate that, like, we might be able to do that for them.
That's true.
Questions on MEF? All right, don't know if we did it yet, but in the request for future agenda items, what we're planning to do is have the, link to the document that has all of our future, like our regularly scheduled future stuff. So we're not constantly going, when are we doing that? When are we doing that? And it's easier to get to. But if there's anything unique that comes up, you wanna, I don't know what it might be, but if you have an idea or thought about it, future agenda item, let us know. All right, we need to go to executive session. Before we do that, just want to remind everybody that might be listening in that we will definitely be coming back to public session. We may have to take action in public session on things we discussed during the executive session. So with that, do I have a motion to go to executive session?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Okay.